Honourable David Parker.
Mr Chairman, I have to start by responding to one of the comments made by the Speaker before last for National Party, who, member for the Taranaki King Country, as part of her contribution, said that the economic development of the country was made better by the manufacture of drones out of Taranaki King Country. And a crueler member than myself would say they elect them, except that I'd have the gender wrong. So I won't say that. Mr Speaker, this third-term government when they're in trouble, they resort to spin. You know, the Finance and Expenditure Committee reported back to Parliament that during the term of this government, net debt has gone from $0 to $60 billion. I didn't hear that referred to by any members of the National Party who sat on the Finance and Expenditure Committee. That same Finance and Expenditure Committee reported back accounts that showed that exports as a percentage of GDP are decreasing, not increasing, that the government is failing in its own target. Mr Speaker, this has become such a problem in New Zealand that we see symptoms of it erupting everywhere. We've just come from a briefing from the Reserve Bank, which has no doubt been given to other members of other parties in this House, and also to the Finance and Expenditure Committee. They gave us a presentation which included the startling fact that despite this enormous rise in Auckland house prices, per capita GDP, that's the output in Auckland per person, is increasing at a substantially lower rate than the rest of the country. So you'd think that if the government thought that it should be encouraging through their economic signals this ridiculous outcome in terms of Auckland house prices, that we'd at least be getting better off as a country. But the truth is, we're not. And why did the National Party lose Northland? Because the people in the provinces know it. They know that under the current settings of the current government, the vortex that is Auckland sucks all of this money, sucks all of the immigration into Auckland, makes the economic problems in Auckland worse, as evidenced by the fact that the average house price has gone up by $300,000 since National was elected. And what's the other side of that effect? What's the other effect of that misallocation of investment of money? It's that not enough money is being invested in our productive export sector, and the Finance and Expenditure Committee reported that back to this House as well. Indeed, it's so clear that we're getting commentators in the likes of the Sunday Star Times lamenting the fact that Yes, Rod Oram can count. He can count, and he reports quite accurately that exports that the government said they were going to increase from 30 to 40% of GDP have already, on the figures that Rod Oram reports, but the member opposite seems to deny, despite the fact that it's also in the Finance and Expenditure Committee report back to this House, exports have now dropped as a percentage of GDP to under 30% of GDP. And what was that man's former boss's response to it? Change the way you measure the target. So Mr Joyce came along and he fiddled the measure. And initially that benefited him because it appeared to show an increase in exports from 30 to 33% of GDP. But then actually on his volumetric basis that he swizzled it to, it turned against him and it sent backwards even under that measure. The truth of it is the measure was intended to measure the value of New Zealand's exports as a percentage of our economy, which was going to, according to National, go from 30 to 40% of GDP. It's gone backwards. It is now under 30% of GDP. Our trade with the rest of the world in goods and services is dropping as a proportion of the economy. The target that they still say is now just an aspirational target of 40% is never going to be met by this government, never, as long as they're in, because they've got the economic signals wrong, which is why house prices in Auckland are going crazy and there is underinvestment in the provinces. What's happening in terms of those subsets of exports? Well, we all know that the dairy price has gone down. Everyone concedes that. That's one of the reasons why the nominal value of exports has dropped recently. But of a more greater concern is that more elaborately transformed exports have been dropping as well, Mr. Speaker.